Let's unpack this further with Professor William Gumede, who is the Executive Chairperson of Democracy Works Foundation and a professor at the School of Governance at the University of the Witwatersrand. Prof, thank you so much for joining us. Really do appreciate it. Ramaphosa has always been touted as a shrewd negotiator, as a consensus-seeking, tactical and strategic negotiator. How bad a reflection will it be on him if tonight's cabinet announcement potentially falls through?
No, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to speak to you. I think the first thing is, maybe let me just explain what's the difference between a government of national unity and an ordinary coalition for viewers. You know, in an ordinary coalition, no party gets the majority. They then put together a coalition of parties to get over 50%. In a government of national unity, there's a difference. In a government of national unity, a party, no party could get the majority, but a party could also get a majority and then decide to bring diversity of parties together because A, there's a crisis in the country, systemic crisis. Two, that that party alone cannot deliver or cannot alone tackle the crisis, because sometimes, right now as a country we have a systemic crisis where one party or one color, one group could potentially cannot alone govern and change. So that's really important. And then from a point of view of putting together a government of national unity, a cabinet, now, there's a whole lot of negotiations that comes with it. In some countries where people put at a national level ordinary coalitions together, it can take sometimes 6 months. 3 months to 6 months, so there's a bit of patience. Although obviously we don't have the time because we're sitting with a country in crisis, and the negotiations has to be there as quickly. Now, what is holding back? Why the delays and why has it taken so long? I think the first one is just in terms of the ANC has been in power for 30 years, and because it's been the majority, it has made its decisions based on majority decision making. Now, if you're in a government of national unity, you must now use consensus decision making. That's different from majority decision making. So a consensus decision making, if you have the majority, you cannot just give your view, you cannot make your appointments the way you want. You have to bring almost equitably, it's like a co-sharing, even if you have
consensus can be difficult where there's irreconcilable differences, which seemingly is the case that has played out between the Democratic Alliance and the ANC over the last week and a half, as we've seen a slew of letters leaked starting from the 22nd of June up until the 25th of June, in what they engaged in, what President Ramaphosa terms negotiation by correspondence, right? And certainly we have been of great benefit to that negotiation process. But it's quite clear there's very little consensus amongst them on critical matters, and that brings about a difficult negotiation process in that no one single party seems to be walking away from the table completely satisfied. What impact could that have on governance?
Now, the first thing is when you make consensus decisions, no single party will actually walk away fully happy. That is the whole point of consensus. And when it's a majority decision making, the biggest party will walk away happy and the smaller parties will be dissatisfied. And also the whole point of a government of national unity that is different to a coalition is when parties have irreconcilable differences, parties go for a government of national unity rather than in a coalition. So, what it demands from in a GNU, you need maturity. You need a higher level of maturity than in a normal coalition. So I think what has happened now is the struggle now for the ANC is, look, some of its members that were cabinet ministers before will have to go. As the ANC appoint, you give its partners positions, and now it has to negotiate that.
Let's talk about just the strategic value of a government of national unity rather than a consensus approach, right? Or rather than a coalition approach, which one is a prerequisite for the other in any case, right? Is the ANC here taking a government of national unity approach instead of just a simple majority coalition approach because there is an opportunity to share blame, to share victory just as much as you would? share blame?
You know, as I say, I mean, with a government of national unity, really, you cannot make decisions as if it's a normal coalition. A normal coalition, you potentially can make majority decision. You got majority, your view carries. But in a consensus, that's different. I think, really, I would rather look at it from a more positive to say, in a government of national unity, what you do is you bring in fresh ideas. Now, let's just say if the ANC had a majority now, it would have appointed its own people, and maybe some people who've been in government since 1994 would be re-elected, reappointed as ministers. But because, you know, 30 years we've got high unemployment, poverty, and all of those issues we're struggling with, clearly we need fresh blood. So it's the opportunity the government of national unity is the ANC is still in power, but it can bring in fresh blood from other parties. So the DA, IFP, other smaller parties, you bring in fresh blood, you bring in new capacity, because clearly for the last 30 years it hasn't delivered.
Yeah, but capacity is built on ideas, and if there's a difference of opinion in ideas, how much of that capacity will be maximized?
Actually, you know, often if you can get a maturity to deal with differences, you can actually leverage the differences in order to deliver more. But it's going to be very, very important that there's a culture, a mindset shift from a majority way of thinking to a consensus way of thinking. I mean, there's an exciting thing about consensus decision making. So why is consensus decision making so much more rewarding in terms of delivering of growth and public service delivery? Because if you have differences and you try to reach a consensus, you then get to know the other party. You begin to look at a view of the other party. And when you get that agreement, the agreement is much more solid than an agreement where you say, well, I've got a majority, I'm going to override you, you just, and so on. And also in a society like our society, we've got big trust issues. You know, there are trust, and our political parties are based on the past. So the ANC is based on
just like President Ramaphosa has been in the past been accused of being a slow actor, slow thinker, and stuck in decision paralysis because of a consensus approach to decision making. That's not falling away, right? Now, in fact, there's more parties to seek a consensus from and to consult and to engage. That decision paralysis that was clearly very emblematic of what the 6th administration was. Do you anticipate and see that to be a part of what will be the 7th administration? No,
the irony is, I mean, the weakness of the Ramaphosa presidency, the past one, is that lack of decisive decision making. And now he will have to preside over the government of national unity. But I must tell you, so the period of for him to negotiate at GNU, that is most probably the most fit for purpose in the ANC to put together this government of national unity. The challenge is now going to be, you know, once it is set up, can he be more decisive? Right. Because now, remember, in a government of national unity with new partners are going to put pressure on him. It was different when he had a majority behind him. Then you can be indecisive because you know, your party leaders will just throw the line. But now he's going to have the DA, the IFP, the Freedom Front Plus. They're going to put a lot of fire. Do you think there will be discipline that prevails throughout this government of national unity, especially amongst parties who walk away from the table where the consensus decision is one that they're not happy with? You know, it will now demand maturity because, I mean, as I say, the whole idea of a government of national unity, decisions will have to be made in the country's interest, not in the party's interest and the leadership interest. That's really going to be key to hold this GNU together.
Do you want to take out your crystal ball quickly and tell us who you think might be the deputy president by 9 p.m. this evening?
I think it's very likely. I mean, I guess that's a big thing. I mean, the problem for the ANC is Paul Masatile is the deputy president of the ANC. They cannot be seen to be excluding him. He is perceived to be in the faction opposed to Ramaphosa. So that group will have to be accommodated. So, you know, he'll most probably find a space. There would be the alternative that they could create is to say a second deputy president, and then bring in, for example, somebody from
But they need a constitutional amendment for that to pass through, which they could pass as their first order of business. But
absolutely.
You know, the chances of that at the moment just are non-existent, it seems.
Yeah, so they're going to need a constitutional change, so they will need to do that. But, for example, there's also another way that they can do that. They could also, say, for example, create a prime minister. I mean, if they're going to change the constitution and think that way, say, well, actually, why don't appoint a prime minister who will then run the the executive, and then the president, because it's a government of national unity, becomes sort of at the top, above everyone else, above party politics, and steer us over the next 5 years, and allow a prime minister to take the executive decisions and also fall on.
By prime minister, we're really just talking about the chairperson of cabinet, is it?
Absolutely, the head of business, government business, yeah. Which is now sort of the deputy president, but he's really he hasn't played, or even not only Paul Masatila, but even previous deputy presidents actually haven't played that sort of prime minister role in the past. Yeah,
we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your time and your insights. Really do appreciate it. Always a fantastic interlocutor. That is Professor William Gumede.